You're listening to the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast, where when you can't be in the outdoors, we bring it to you. Welcome back to the Chasing Tails Outdoor Podcast. My name is Walter. His name is Chase, and we are dead set to bring you the outdoors when you yourself can't be outside. It's just that simple. Every week we drop episodes every Tuesday for you guys on your way to work, mowing the grass, cleaning up the honey-do list. We got you covered. So Chase, dude, welcome back. Thank you for joining me for yet again another week. I keep expecting one day for you to be like, listen, Buckmasters has called me. It's time for me to get the promotion I so rightfully deserve. But you're here again, and I appreciate you, sir.
Yeah. I've turned them down 3 or 4 times already. So you know how it is. You just keep getting something thrown in front of you. Eventually, you're going to take it. But
that's right.
No, man. Today was a good day. Actually went and picked up 2 of my deer that I had mounted from the 2019 season. So finally got those back. So that was good to get to finally see the finished product on those deer, man. So I was super excited.
Yeah, man. You're going to run out of deer space here soon.
That's the goal. I don't think I'll. That's my goal every year is to find another place to put a deer, man. But I have plenty of space. Actually, I don't even have the deer. The deer currently aren't in my house. They're actually in my garage, in a separate room in my garage. So I'm waiting because there's some mounts that I want to get, and they've been on back order till I think almost April or something. So I'm waiting to get those mounts, and then I'm going to move some in the house finally. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I do my own Euros, so I don't get to make those fun drives. But I'm envious of you, man. I know you. You just dropped off your taxidermy from this year, and you're like, man, I still haven't gotten last year's yet. And so I know you're happy to get that on the wall because that was a hell of a year for you. I bet you that was a hell of a taxidermy bill too, huh?
No, well, the one was free. So
that's right.
Yeah, the one was free, so that was good, and so I only had to pay for the one. So wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. And my other one, the one from this year, actually is going to be ready either the end of this month or early March. I've already been told. So yeah. Well, I got it there. The ones from 2019, they had to sit and wait, so the taxidermist didn't even get them till the season was over. And had that not happened, I think I would have had them a lot sooner. But this one I took during the season, so it's going to be a little bit faster.
Right on, man. Well, we just got off the phone with what I think one day, I'm going to just say this, I think one day his name is going to be like legendary status of the dude that just kills in a big buck in every state. Jake Bush comes on, and this guy screams like humility. Like the guy was super transparent, and we picked his brain. This is part 2 of, I think it's part 2. Yeah, this is part 2 of the Lessons of the Fall series, where we are picking the minds of people who have come on the show before, talked about tactics, and we want to know what they learned this past season. And Jake, dude, I mean, I don't know that you could ask for more from him. I mean, he was super transparent with what he had to learn.
Yeah, Jake is a great guy. Like you mentioned, real humble. Once we got off the phone, he was even kind of like, hey, I was glad I was able to do this podcast, because a lot of times you don't sit back and reflect on things that you could have done different or went wrong during the season. You kind of reflect back on all the things that went right. And it's good to go back and think about, maybe I should be focusing on this instead of that. And I'd heard this was it's not really related to hunting, but it kind of applies, is that even Tom Brady, I mean, he's won 7 Super Bowls, the greatest of all time, is right after a game, like the next morning, he wakes up at 5:00 in the morning to dissect the game film, to look at all the things that went wrong that he can fix. So even somebody that good still goes and takes the time and effort to go back and look at all of the mishaps or what went wrong to kind of critique them and make it to where that doesn't happen again, and you can focus on other things. So I think that we picked a good guest in Jake Bush to come on and talk about some of his lessons of the fall.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the key to repeatable success, right? Being honest with yourself, being transparent with yourself, making it being a student of the game every day, every year. And He there at the tail end of the podcast talks about how he's taken on some really difficult terrain that he's not super familiar with, and I am somehow confident that he'll still be able to connect with that as well. He said, did he say 50 or 60 miles he's already put on the ground in that piece?
Yeah, I think he said it was 60 miles, and that was just
Yeah.
like chump change. So he's got a lot more to go, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, we're going to get you guys to the episode, but just want to tell you about a couple things. One, we want to thank the Patreon supporters of this podcast. I think I've thanked everybody by name. I'm going to, and then double check that to make sure. I know I've gotten everybody hats who needed a hat. I should have gotten stickers out to everybody who needs a sticker. If you don't know what Patreon is, and you want to learn, it is a crowdfunding source for the podcast. For 15 cents a day, you can support the show, get a sticker, get a hat. You get entered for 4 quarterly giveaways, of which we are currently giving away an Alps Grand Slam turkey vest in Bottomland. And Chase, you've worked with your buddy to get us a couple calls added to that as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. He did a really good job on the pot call last year. It's the glass call. It's got the Chasing Tails logo on it. Beautiful. He's currently working on that right now, and we're even going to throw in some mouth calls from the Longbeard Life. So I think that'll be a good package for somebody this quarter.
Yeah, it's going to be a cherry pot with a red slate over glass, and it's going to have our logo and the year 2021 on there for you guys. So I am excited to see that. As soon as we have photos, we will post them and we'll share that with you guys. That's just one of our ways that we say thanks, because in the end, Chase and I are always going to do this podcast. What Patreon does, it's not a paycheck for us. It just allows us to do more of it. When a camera, craps the bed mid-season, we have the ability to replace it. When we need gas to go and travel and shoot some videos, it just helps. So if you like the content that we're putting out and you want to see more of it, you want to chip in, if you want to be added to our Marco Polo group where everybody can chat with each other who are patrons and share tactics and encouragement, which is just the best thing to have if you're asking me mid-season, check it out. The link's in the show notes below, or you can go to patreon.com/Chasing Tails Outdoors. If you're looking for some new scree gear, some new camo, use the promo code Chasing Tails. You get 15% off your order from Scree Gear. That those guys support us, and honestly, it's a guilt-free endorsement. Awesome gear, awesome price. It always works. And in fact, we're going to have somebody who works with Scree on the show very soon as well. And last but not least, Tethered. If you are interested in the best, lightest, most functional saddle gear out there, check them out. Tethered Nation. I'm rocking the Phantom. Chase is rocking the Phantom. We're going to be probably rocking their new sticks this year, which I'm stupid excited about. So those are the guys that support the show. So if you're interested, go show them some love. Check out Patreon. We'd love to have you. But with that, it's on to the show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with a guest that the last time we talked threatened to come down here and shoot all of our big deer that Chase couldn't catch by January came around. But COVID happened, plans changed, and we didn't make it make a chance to really have that deer camp. But that's okay, because we're gonna have a little sit down right now. We're gonna pick the brain of what I think is probably one of the fastest rising deer minds that I get to watch, and he puts all his content out there. Jake Bush, dude, what's going on in your world?
Hey, not a whole lot, man. Thanks for having me on. It doesn't look like you guys needed my help at all. To be honest, you guys did pretty good down there. I've been following along and everything, but yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, man. No, listen, the last time we talked, a lot of pieces kind of came together. I tried to apply some of the things that we talked about, and you could tell that there was a hunger and a drive for you to continue to learn Ohio. Correct me if I'm wrong. Last year was your first year. No, not like last year, but as of when we talked, you'd only spent one season hunting in Ohio, right?
Yeah. Yep. So this past season would have been my second.
Right. Okay. And so you have 2 years in the same space, and I can tell that you feel like you're starting to figure things out, because you started venturing to some really tough areas to hunt, or to scout at least, for the upcoming year. So I am eager to pick your brain tonight. We're going to be talking about lessons of the fall, things that you have learned. And I'm just curious, from a guy that kills as many big bucks as you do you feel like you just have a system in place and you just execute, or are you constantly trying to learn as you go?
It's honestly a constant evolution, and that's that's one of the things I really try to key in on. And one of the actual lessons that I learned this fall, once again, was do not get complacent whatsoever. And so I really took a step back after this fall. You know, I still killed a really good deer on public, but it wasn't the buck that I was after, or even the top 3 bucks that I was after. And it really set me back a little bit. And so I've really been attacking the season differently. I've been trying to just pick up as much good information and put as many pieces together as possible, you know, work as hard as I can and as efficiently as I can to hopefully put myself in that spot come October 1st.
Right on, man. Yeah, I think not letting up. Chase remarked this past year that I had put in more effort this year than I had in previous seasons, and obviously my season showed a marketable change there. What does staying hungry look like for you? What did you, when you think back to this past season, what stands out to you as things that maybe lessons that you've learned?
Okay. So one of the biggest for me was how these setups. So going into going into season last year, you know, I ended up killing that deer down here, my second hunt, and it was my first hill country hunt in Ohio. So I didn't have a ton of experience under my belt, but I felt like I had a lot of pieces that I dialed in. Going into this, I attacked a lot of those same areas because I had really good bucks in there. I mean, you know, right at that Boone and Crockett level deer. So yeah, so basically after killing that last year, I felt like I had a lot of pieces put together, and then I took that into spring scouting, went through my spring scouting and really dialed in some of these spots. But the thing that I didn't recognize that I had off a little bit was the amount of deer bedding in some of these spots. So one of the big issues that I had was I would set up on a specific bed and there would be a buck in that bed, but it wasn't the buck I was after. And I ran into that issue quite a few times. That was one of the big things I struggled with. I got in front of a lot of deer. I passed up a 146-inch buck that ended up getting shot day 4 because I saw the giant I was after that day. And that's another lesson. I mean, that was one of those things where I had a wind for the day. I had everything set up the way I needed it, but I didn't verify the wind direction for every hour. So I got complacent on my wind directions. I had a west wind. I set up in there in a hub expecting a west wind to blow my scent out of this valley. And at 6 o'clock, it switched to an east wind. Well, he came down off his bed at 5:50 and was at 60 yards at 6 o'clock when my wind switched. So my wind completely switched on me. It was forecasted that way. I didn't catch it. I didn't pay attention enough to that. And that small detail cost me, you know, the second biggest buck of my life. And, you know, I chased that deer around all year. That was my best opportunity at him. I saw him quite a few times, and it was really just a matter of being a little bit off of my setup. And so another lesson I learned with that, something I'm going to take into this year that's a little bit different for me, is, you know, in the past, we talked about it on the last podcast. In the past, I've always been trying to locate as many big bucks as possible. So, you know, even if it's up in the 10 or 15 target bucks, this year I'm going to take a little different approach. I'm going to take 2 of my best historical locations, and then I'm going to add 1 spot that's closer to home. And I'm really going to focus on these 3 areas. And so what I'm going to do with that, like my trail camera data, instead of broadcasting, you know, 20, 25 cameras throughout the state of Ohio on public land, I'm going to have pieces that have 12 to 15 cameras in each piece. So I can kind of get a little more movement. You know, if a deer takes a different trail, I can kind of have that trail fine tuned. My plan is I've got 2 very specific bedding locations that I can target. I want to place cameras around these locations. I want to place, you know, anywhere from 5 to 8 cameras, depending on exit trails, within 150 yards of each bed. That is like a specific bedding location. And I want to see what camera that deer walks by the most. And then I'll kind of dial in my hunts like that. And that should just help me, you know, I already have some of these general locations dialed in, but I don't have the specific tree that they walk by the most that year, that fall, dialed in. That's something I can work on quite a bit. Yeah, that's probably my biggest lesson is really don't spread myself overly thin and kind of try to fine tune some of these areas.
So If I'm hearing you correctly, are you say, honestly, I think of all the guests we had on last year, you were the one that had like the most deer pegged, right? Like just you're the I never forget talking to you offline. You're like, oh, I got X many X, picked out and this kind of thing. I'm like, holy crap! Like you'd put in all this effort, and it seems like you're kind of are you going the opposite direction entirely, or are you trying to find like some kind of midpoint in there where obviously you've identified how to get on big deer, but you're going to kind of select one or two or three to go after?
Yeah, so I'm still gonna identify these specific areas. So, from having a little bit of historical data in Ohio now, I know a lot of these really giant bucks I was chasing survived. And hopefully I can find their antlers pretty soon as well. But I really want to still put in the exact same amount of work, but I just want to fine tune that work a little bit. So instead of hitting so many pieces throughout Ohio, maybe I hit 3 instead, and just really try to get specific on them. My goal in Ohio is to kill in the first week or 2 weeks and then be able to travel during the rut, because I feel like my opportunities in other states are going to be a little bit better during the rut because I can't put in that time. So no, I'm still staying on the path I've always taken, where it's locate the deer, figure out their specific patterns, figure out what deer they're, as far as like trail camera inventory, glassing, everything like that. It's just a matter of, once I locate that deer of the caliber I want, or an area that has 3 or 4 of those deer, I really want to take resources and dive into that spot,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. I remember when you told me, all the different deer you had located, I thought to myself, like, how he's got one buck tag. How's he going to pick between all of those options? And I mean, I think you kind of outlined, maybe why that was an issue for you. Do you think that held you, like, genuinely held you back, or do you think you could? Are you still going to identify all of those deer, but then just kind of hold on to some as a reserve if something happens?
Exactly. Yes. I still want to, I definitely want to have those backup plans, and that's always going to be really important. I think I'm just going to take my general backup. I always went way above and beyond with locating them. Last year I located, I would say 15 to 20 bucks that were roughly in that 150 plus inch range. I just had a ton of bucks. And the good thing about that is being able to target the different beds. But the issue I ran into is I had one buck specifically that was just substantially bigger than everything else. And he won me over. And so I constantly kept targeting him. And I didn't use any of the intel I had on those other deer until my buddy came down from Michigan and I put him in one of those spots. He actually killed day one down here, which was awesome. I was super pumped for him. But so those backup plans never got used because I was so focused on that one deer. And moving forward, that's something I just want to focus on.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That definitely sounds like a problem that you and Chase might might run into. I sincerely doubt I'm going to run into enough big deer that I'm going to have to pick which one I'm going after.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And I actually, that deer had me so tore up, I passed up the 146 was a really wide, beautiful 10. He got shot during muzzleloader, but I passed him up at 7 yards and still kind of contemplate what's wrong with me. But
Were you about to say something, Chase?
No, I was just saying, I mean, I had to do a little bit of what he's talking about this year as far as, okay, yeah, I've got this deer located. I'm pretty sure he's bedded in that area. But I started to devote a lot more trail cameras to that area, diving in more, just trying to figure out, okay, is he exiting out this way on the days he's not coming on this camera? Is he going this way? Why was he over here on a camera that I had across the property that wasn't for him? So it just, to me, it kind of sounds like, hey, there's really no point in having 15 bucks semi-dialed in. You're better off just having, okay, I've got 3 that I've got really dialed in and go after those, especially if you're talking about taking out a deer within the first 5 days of the season.
yeah, exactly. And I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, that pretty much completely sums it up. And that's the beauty of like the bow hunting journey for everybody. So it's about the evolution, where sometimes you'll go through a stage where you just want to locate like a bunch of good bucks, and then you want to kill that giant, and then maybe you don't care about antler size at all and you just want to kill a mature buck as you get down the road. It's constantly evolving, and that's what is, that's what I love about it more than anything. I'm really at the point, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I can already see myself, I'm doing all the scouting and stuff in these new spots, but I'm still hung up on that buck from last year a little bit. And that's kind of like a personal, I saw him a few times. Hopefully I find his antlers. I know he's just an absolute monarch of a buck. So I can see myself kind of fine tuning in on that one or two specific deer every year, but I still, like we talked about before, just need multiple backup plans.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. So outside of monitoring the wind on an hour basis or identifying those key travel quarters, because I feel like I heard about that. Is that a topic that was discussed not too long back on Exodus's podcast with oh gosh, the fella's name escapes me.
Steve Shirk is who I heard it from.
That's who I was talking about. Right. Okay.
Yep.
So we're on the same page. That's where that makes sense. Because
Yep.
I'm envious of you guys because topographically, I think it's easier to, not that it's easy, but I think it's easier to figure out which way deer are coming and going because you have those limiting factors, whereas ours are kind of like biological in nature, and maybe less defined. Looking back on that season, is there anything else that you feel like you could improve on for the upcoming year?
Really, my biggest issue that I had going into season, which was different from every other year for me, was the fact that I went out west for 2 weeks, literally right before season started. So I didn't have the 2 weeks of intel leading up to season that I normally have, and I was just a little behind the eight ball. And it was a weird year for me. I mean, it was, it's kind of what life is. Like I closed on my house, I believe October 6th. I totaled my Jeep the third day of season. It was just, it was a lot going on. So I was balancing a lot of factors, but that's when you really have to, I almost felt like there was a couple of days where I was just really complacent more than anything else, where I just wanted to be in the woods and I wasn't necessarily focusing as hard as I should have been. And that was, maybe due to a little bit of personal stuff too, but that's something that you need to keep in check with yourself. And, there's probably, I could have had a little better setups on some of these hunts. I could have decided to not quite chase that buck as hard as I did. But also on the flip side of that, in that whole process, I learned so much specifically about that deer, and that I'm happy that I learned that. I learned a lot. He's the most mature deer in that area. So seeing those travel patterns, seeing what his tendencies were is definitely something that's going to help me in the future quite a bit. And it's just a matter of finding enough of those locations, I believe, more than anything else.
I mean, did you learn anything from any of your trail camera data about that deer this year that'll help you next season?
Yes, 100%. I learned specifically, so a lot of these areas have multiple points that they bet on. And one of the big things that I learned was specifically what bowl system. So there's the main ridge, and then there's a bunch of points that jut out that have beds on them. And then there's like a few major bowls in that ridge as well. I learned what major bowl system he likes to bet around a lot. And a lot of that was due to moving my cameras in there a little later in October. I dedicated a couple more cameras to that location. And so moving forward, that was definitely one of the best learning lessons I had.
Was he keying in on any food sources or anything like that you noticed? I mean, did you have okay, why is he where he's at? Was it like a specific food source, or that was his bedding area?
Yeah, so we had a great oak year down here. We had acorns all over the place, at least in my section that I was really targeting. And there was specific, I would say, oak flats in general that they would spend a lot of time on. And then there was some private ag fields about a mile out onto the, to the west that were getting hit pretty good as well. And he would make his way there almost every night, but it was, 2 hours past dark at that point. But yeah, specific acorn flats that I found that were pretty good. And that I saw that across a lot of different deer. I mean, I had a lot of bucks that were hitting acorns, well in daylight all throughout October that I could definitely key in on in the future.
Okay. Have you thought about using any kind of software to create predictive I don't know, predictions based on the because you run trail cameras so avidly and with abundance. I'm just curious, have you ever thought about using any of that predictive software to see if there's patterns there that maybe you haven't thought about yet?
I haven't ventured into the software side. I do keep like just a database for myself that I created, just an Excel sheet, and then I have photos that correlate with that are based on a lot of factors, like the specific weather, wind direction, time of year, things like that, where I can open up some of these folders and say, okay, on a southwest wind in the first week of October, what deer did I have moving at daylight at what locations?
Okay, that makes sense. So going into this year, lessons having been learned from last year, what do you in looking forward think you need to improve on that maybe you didn't learn the painful way this year?
So, overall, I still feel I had a really successful season, but the big thing is if I need to recognize early if I'm going to key in on one deer or not. If I'm going to key in on one deer, the other 14 deer that I find don't matter. And I need to really focus on that specific deer more. And that's one of the big things. So, like we've talked about quite a bit in this podcast, just being able to recognize that early and dedicate those resources to that early enough to, be where I need to be first couple of days of season. And if I don't decide to do that and chase that one specific deer, say I have three or four deer in like the same, age class and antler class, I can set up the way that I've always hunted them and hunt them based on specific weather patterns and wind.
Right on. What new challenges, what new places are you going to take on this year?
I moved an hour east as well, and that was part of the whole. I had to drive an hour and a half every day and night to hunt that location I was hunting those big deer at. So that was another aspect of it that was a little difficult. But so I want to target out where I'm at a little bit more, and it's a lot of like strip mine land. It's totally different than anything I've really hunted because everything is almost monotonous. You have a ton of hills that almost look identical. You have these big, like stripped out ponds that create funnels throughout. It's like a network of funnels, basically. The entire thing, it does have a lot of oaks, but it's all briars as well. There's a ton of undergrowth. It's very thick. And that's why, selfishly, I had some questions for you guys about that. I remember on the last podcast, we talked about how a lot of the land you guys are hunting is like extremely monotonous. And I just kind of wanted to get your take on what you learned this season as well, or, maybe mistakes that you guys made trying to figure out some of that land down there. And maybe I could use that this season out here.
Oh boy. Well, Chase, as the big buck killer, do you want to take that on first, or do you want me to talk about how to kill scrub bucks?
I mean, one of the tactics that I use for that is trail cameras. I mean, just a lot of trail cameras to try to get me dialed in on an area because, like I said, a lot of it's monotonous. There's no real good terrain changes. I mean, you may look for features that come together where you have pines that may go into a swamp or an oak hammock or something edge, but trying to maybe really get the buck you're going after dialed in, kind of like you do, is try to figure out at least an area where they're bedding at and then slowly work out from there. And maybe surround that area with cameras to try to figure out, okay, this buck is coming out of this area on a good pattern, this direction or that direction, depending on the wind, what the food sources are, and things like that is how I kind of approach it. I mean, a lot of it, because a lot of the bucks, I mean, they don't really bed in the same spot, kind of like you were talking about some this year. A lot of the bucks weren't bedding in the same area over and over again. And I've noticed that a lot of the deer, kind of where I'm at, they kind of work patterns. Like they'll show up for a couple of days and then they'll disappear for like a week. And then they may show up for a couple of days again and then they'll be gone for 10 days. And there's one specific buck that I was kind of going after this year. Like he did that on so much of a kind of consistent pattern, but you never could kind of quite figure out of why he was showing up on the two particular days that he would kind of show up for. So I think I've got to get that more dialed in. But I just go with what are my trail cams telling me. And if there's nothing in those areas, then I keep moving my trail cams until I can find, okay, this is where that buck is most consistently.
I got you. That makes sense. And so, they're moving their beds around a lot. Do you believe that's due to like the food sources shifting that frequently, or what do you think's causing that? Is it just that it's so monotonous that
Yeah,
they just have so many
yeah, I think
options?
they just have so many options, and it's kind of like okay, and a lot of it is from when they start here, like when the season starts, like they're almost kind of in a rut, getting ready to rut for the most part. So I think it even gets more difficult kind of down where we're at because they're already starting to focus on does and stuff almost like right as the season starts, like you kind of like you've got like a real short window, maybe like the first couple of days maybe to get on one, and then after that they've like spread out, they're not in bachelor groups anymore, and they're just kind of all over the place. But I think it's just there's so many different places they can bed that they will bed those areas then, as opposed to they have to keep going back to the same area over and over again.
Yeah, I got you. That makes total sense. And I mean, something that I might rely on with that this year, you sparked a little flame for me, but something that I might rely on is trying to locate areas that maybe they do get a little bit of pressure, and then they would make that bedding more specific. They might be pushing these deer back into a specific corner or a specific bowl or knob somewhere, something like that that's a little bit different, and see if I can because ideally I'd like to pattern them early season, find the buck I want, pattern him, and then kill him. But if it's the bedding that sets up just like what you're talking about, which it very well could, because I'm finding beds everywhere, then maybe that's not going to be quite an option. Maybe it's more of trying to locate like the specific food source and also like the hottest sign as well. It's going to be a challenge. It's different than I've hunted. I'm really excited for it. I'm probably going to lean on you guys quite a bit and ask a bunch of questions because it kind of seems like terrain wise, it's close to what you're used to. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And as far as sign and stuff down, it's almost like there's so much sign of deer, like small bucks and stuff make so much sign. I have a hard time like locating like big buck sign down here for some reason. I don't know if it's just that they're so dominant they don't really need to lay down any sign, because like a really big buck here like literally has no competition comparatively. So to me, I mean, I had this buck. It was last year that I was after, just giant, mega giant for Florida, and I could not. I had his areas kind of his pinned down, but I could not find sign that he was laying down. As far as like rubs and things, like you would have thought that there'd just be this massive rubs or rubs somewhere to where this buck was using, and I could not find anything of the such on that deer. So I don't know if it was just he was so dominant that it didn't matter and he was going to do whatever he wanted, and he could take any doe that he wanted from any buck, but it was hard to just kind of go, okay, this is that buck sign. And I kind of know you're kind of are you talking about like feed sign and things like that as well? So yeah, feed sign and stuff. I mean, there's just so much for them to eat down here that very rarely do you find like you will find it from time to time, but like hot feed trees, things like that. There's just so much of a buffet that they kind of travel, unless there's like a crop somewhere like peanuts or whatever, planted peas or something like that, that it's really hard to like dial in like a specific food source for them.
I got you. That makes sense. And how about the soil down there as far as like actual tracks go? Like it almost seems like I might run into the same thing where maybe the absolute best sign, the two things that I'll key in on, maybe it's like community scrapes where I can get this buck on camera every couple of days, or coming off of a bed hitting a scrape, more frequently than that, or just big tracks in general. Maybe that's, walking creeks or areas where they leave impressions in the dirt and just looking for like the specifically bigger tracks.
Right. Yeah. Tracks definitely seem to help up there. Down here, I mean, I try to focus on tracks and things, but even his track, like just trying to find spots for his track and stuff, like a consistent deal, I was just like, I mean, and I spent plenty of time trying to do it. I just never could like get him really like, okay, and the thing that helped me the most was just the cameras, was having him pegged down. So that's how I do it. Walt probably has a totally different approach.
Yeah, I think I would add that in areas where the terrain is monotonous and everything is rather similar, I'm finding, and again, no means a pro at this, obviously, but I am finding a correlation between certain types of thick cover. And I know that sounds really funny, but there's like a certain stem count that becomes prohibitive for the majority of deer in this area. And I find there's this little like mulberry. It's not mulberry, but it's like this little like tiny like crepe myrtle looking bush. Somebody's probably listening to this and screaming into the microphone what it is, and please message me and tell me. But I'm finding that there's on the higher points of swamps and the higher points of ridges where this little crepe myrtle bush is, when all the leaves fall and it's dead of winter, you can see 100 yards in it, and there's beds in there, and I see deer most frequently right there. I bust them out of beds there, and there's a kind of a type of grass I found here as well that they really like. It's like a real thick, coarse grass. Again, I'm sure somebody's screaming, but they really, around water areas, they really seem to key in on that. And I'm sure that they will bed wherever they feel comfortable. But I've noticed a pattern where there are areas in which deer are spending more time bedding because of the type of X species of bedding cover. And as a result, when I put cameras up there, this held especially true in Georgia, but I'm finding it to hold true here in Florida as well. As I put up cameras on trails coming in and out of those areas, I'm getting way more deer. So, into the thick stuff is what most people are going to tell you. I would say whenever you find a bed, note what he's in. If you think it's a buck bed, note what he's in and see if there isn't a pattern to the type of placement in the vegetation specifically, because it seems like there's a correlation here. And this is something I'm probably gonna double my trail camera arsenal this year and have close to 30 cameras, because I want to really test this theory out, because I'm finding a lot of big deer sign southeast Georgia, southwest Georgia, right here in Tallahassee. I'm getting pictures of big deer when certain vegetation exists, and I'd be willing to bet that would hold true where you are, but it would be a different type of vegetation.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I've already put like 60 miles of boots on the ground in this new location, and I have picked up on something like that I really didn't put a lot of thought in until you mentioned that. But there's briars everywhere, but some of the briar patches on top of these, like old strip mine tailings piles that are, pretty high. They're like 50 feet higher than everything else. Not all of them have great bedding, but the ones that do have like this grass mixed in with that bedding. So maybe that's a feature I can key in on and run cameras on the ones that have that specific grass up there. Whether it's, I don't know that would be adding, whether it's a little bit of security cover or they're milling on it before they go down to their primary food source or whatever it is. I have noticed that. That's something that I'll keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, no, and the other thing that I found is, in those areas where the bedding is, look for that historical bedding that maybe they're not using, because it seems like, and especially with food sources, because there's so many bedding options, that as one comes and goes, their habits change overnight. Chase, one of the things I on that piece of Georgia public that I really picked apart was when I had the most deer activity, there were still acorns hitting the ground. And the moment that quit, within a matter of a few weeks, the pictures in those bedding areas nearest that really plummeted, and the bedding shifted into the denser cover, where there was a higher stem count, obviously, for them to browse. So I attribute personally, not saying Chase is wrong, but I attribute those bedding areas changing for just like real subtle biological shifts. Maybe it's the rut coming into heat and a doe comes into heat, or maybe it's just as simple as acorns aren't super abundant that year, and when they run out, that area just doesn't appeal to them anymore. So, maybe weigh those as well. I'm making a good note of areas that have a lot of acorn caps on the ground that are adjacent to those bedding areas that I'm finding, and persimmons as well. When I find that, I'm marking that, and that's a high priority for me. I got more bucks on camera this year doing that than I ever have, like every year of my life combined. I mean, it was unreal the amount of bucks. I mean, they weren't like Pope and Youngs, but I just had bucks everywhere. Every time I put up a camera, it seemed like up in Georgia.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's the awesome thing about doing this, podcasting with guys, or basically everybody that's talking deer anymore. I mean, it's awesome that you can get so many different takes on it and get so many different tips. I'm a farm country slash swamp slash hill country guy. It's specifically hill country, but I've never hunted a monotonous terrain, and having you guys to just rely on a little bit is great. I mean, I'm taking all this in, and that's one of the best lessons right there, is just the ability to really the drive and the motivation to keep wanting to learn from everybody. Every person that hunts has some sort of information tip that'll probably help you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And bits of each combined as well. I found that to be really really beneficial as well. So, dude, I am obviously here to talk hunting whenever you want. Pick up the phone, text, email if you still have email. I don't know if people still have emails, but seriously, I enjoy it, and honestly, it kind of makes me wonder if Chase and I wouldn't, like, not bragging, but it does make me wonder, like, if that wouldn't be a suitable place for Chase and I to come up and test our own metal, just because if it's similar, would we be able to apply similar tactics, whereas maybe not. It'd just be interesting to see if those patterns hold true. So keep me posted, man, and definitely next year I want to have a deer camp, whether it's a late season one here or something. We got to figure something out.
Oh yeah, and hey, doors open up here at the cabin. You guys are more than welcome to come up here and give that spot a shot, because I'd like to see you guys tackle it. To be honest, it'd be cool.
Yeah, man. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to twist Chase's arm to go to leave difficult hunting to go to difficult hunting. He's not a glutton for punishment like me, but we'll, we'll get up at some point for sure. So.
Oh come on! I went to Michigan late season after gun season with a bow. You guys got it.
Yeah.
That's when I rely on the luck factor.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Before I let you go, I'd be remiss not to give you an opportunity. I think you started a YouTube channel that all your content can be dropped or will be posted to, but it wasn't live the last time we spoke. Do you want to give everybody some info on that?
Yeah, yep. So there's 3 hunting films out right now. My 25 point that I killed on public here, my buck I killed last year, which was a 12 point on public. And then my buddy Drew Emmington from Michigan, he came down as well and killed a really nice public land buck. So there's 3 hunts on YouTube. There's a Ohio public land shed hunting video on there, which is pretty cool. And we plan on posting a lot more content. We brought a couple more guys onto the channel. So I'm really excited to bring out some good content. That is Legends of the Hunt on YouTube. And then you can find us at Legends of the Hunt on Instagram. And my Instagram is Jake Bush Solo.
There you go. Guys, you heard it from the GOAT himself, the dude that kills the big deer in the hardest to hunt places. If you enjoyed this episode, do us one solid. Get outside. Now is the time to go scouting. Now is the time to get after it. And we're giving you the information. Jake's told you what he's doing, so go get some trail cameras, try it out, see what happens, and let us know. No matter what you do, the most important thing is you get outside and enjoy the great outdoors.